right, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Want to invite you to join the program, and we're going to invite you to talk about two things in the callers. We're going to ask you to focus on these two questions. What do you think was the major news story of 2013, or what to you was the most significant development or news story or episode or occurrence in 2013? You think back over this last year, what's the story that stands out in your mind and why? Want to know not just what stands out, but why that story particularly sticks in your brain as significant or important or memorable. Could be any of those things. And you can even weigh in on both of these if you want. Looking ahead to 2014, do you have any predictions for 2014? What do you think is going to happen in 2014? So most memorable or important or significant story of 2013, and any predictions that you have for 2014 in any sort of part of our cultural life, our social life, political life, legal life, whatever it happens to be. If you got a prediction for us, share that with us. 888-589-8840 is the number to call, 888-589-8840. You know, and we've talked often about the fact that there's a reason why you listen to AFR Talk and why our listening audience is growing, and that is because you have come to recognize that we're a source that you can trust. Even when we're talking about using walnuts to cover scratches in furniture, we're an outlet that you can trust. And, of course, we're just having fun with that. But the point is, people are looking for some source of perspective and information and news that they can rely on, and increasingly the American people are finding they've got to go to conservative outlets to get it. That's why you come to Focal Point, why you come to AFR Talk. Got a story here from Breitbart about CNN. Their ratings in 2013 are the lowest they've been in 20 years. They are going into the basement. MSNBC is down there with them. Meanwhile, Fox News is dominating cable news. Fox had more than twice as many primetime viewers as MSNBC and almost 3 times as many as CNN. So they had more viewers than CNN and MSNBC combined. So again, I think that's because Fox isn't reliably conservative. I don't mean to say that they're not reliably, consistently conservative on every issue, but they are far more conservative. They're far more fair, far more objective than CNN or MSNBC, and people are fleeing those alternate outlets in droves. This is just sort of a throwaway story, but I thought it was interesting. Public Policy Polling did a piece about the Washington Redskins nickname, and they discovered that only 18%, this is registered voters, so not that they're going to get to vote on this, but that's what the sample was. Only 18% of registered voters think that the Redskins ought to change their name, and 71% of registered voters think that the Redskins ought to keep the name just as it is. And I think that's because they recognize that they came up with the name Redskins because it stands for things like bravery and stands for things like courage. And a lot of people know that the Redskins were named in honor of the very first coach of the Washington franchise, the Washington Redskins, who was a full-blooded Native American. And we had that story earlier this year about the Navajo code talkers. Remember, they were the guys in World War II. They would talk to each other in Navajo, completely indecipherable. The enemy, the Axis powers had no idea what was being said. So it was a beautiful way to communicate very sensitive information in a way that was absolutely secure, these Navajo code talkers. And they showed up at a Monday night game at Redskins Stadium wearing Redskins jackets and completely in support of the Redskins as a name they know it honors traditions of bravery and courage in the Native American people. Now, I want to touch on this story just briefly before we go to the phones. 888-589-8840, most memorable story development of 2013. Any predictions you have for 2014? But this story has to do with the perils of legalized marijuana. Now, we were joking about it in the last segment, but the reality is if you drill down to the floor here, legalizing marijuana is not a laughing matter because there are serious health risks associated with marijuana use. And I'm looking at a piece, interestingly enough, on the pages of the Washington Post, that there was any outlet that you think would be cheering relaxation of laws against marijuana use, it would be the Washington Post. Instead, Ruth Marcus has got a piece where she's very critical of what Colorado, Washington's getting ready to do it, Alaska might do it, Oregon might do it, California might do it. And she's connecting it with this trend toward legalizing same-sex marriage. And she says it's kind of a similar trend when you really think about it, kind of kicking over classical standards of restraint and moral judgment in favor of something that departs from the norm, departs from what's right, departs from what's best, all swept up in this kind of trend toward being current and whatever. So she says, look, you got the same kind of trend that's affecting policies on marijuana use. But she says, and I'm quoting, widespread legalization is a bad idea, even if it's an inevitable development. So she says, look, we may not be able to stop this thing for a while. She says she doesn't think we're going to be able to stop same-sex marriage either. I think she's wrong about that. I think we can. But she says widespread legalization of marijuana is a bad idea. And she explains why. She says society will not be better off with another mind-altering legal substance. In particular, our kids will not be better off with another mind-altering legal substance. As the American Medical Association concluded in recommending against legalization last November, quote, cannabis is a dangerous drug and as such is a public health concern. It is the most common illicit drug involved in drugged driving, particularly in drivers under the age of 21, and early cannabis use is related to later substance use disorders. It's being translated. The American Medical Association says, look, it is a gateway drug. They use marijuana. After a while, it doesn't give them enough of whatever they're looking for, so they graduate to something a little stiffer and something even more toxic. And that's the American Medical Association said, look, it's a public health concern because people are going to drive while they're high. You're going to have a huge problem with this in Colorado, huge problem in Washington, people driving under the influence of marijuana. You know, and we talked about this in our production meeting this morning. One of the problems they're having in Colorado, they're trying to identify some way to measure whether people have had enough pot to be high and to be driving under the influence, and they cannot come up with an objective measure. They came up with a number, and I guess you would sample it. I forget how you measure it. I don't think it's a breathalyzer thing. You have to take the blood, and it's the percentage that's in the blood. And they came up with a figure that thought, okay, anybody over this, they're driving under the influence. And people that use medical marijuana, that have prescriptions for it and are using it to treat some kind of medical condition, they say, look, we have more than that in our blood system all day long, 24 hours a day. So no matter when you pulled us over, we would exceed the threshold that you're saying makes us drive under the influence. So they scrap that, don't want to do that. We don't want to get the people that just have a legitimate or think they have a legitimate medical reason. We don't want to get them in trouble. So what that means is they've got no way to quantify when somebody's driving under the influence. So it's going to be it's just a disaster waiting to happen. And here's what the AMA also said: heavy cannabis use in, am I saying that right? Is it cannabis or cannabis? It's cannabis. Cannabis. Heavy cannabis use concerns me that Jeff knows the answer to that question too. Heavy cannabis use in adolescence causes persistent impairments in neurocognitive performance and IQ. It damages IQ. Use is associated with increased rates of anxiety, mood, and psychotic thought disorders. So this is the AMA. So look, this impairs neurocognitive performance. That's your brain. It affects the way your brain works, and it damages IQ. And then she cites this Ruth Marcus Washington Post of 2012 study of more than 1,000 New Zealanders. And this is going to be our Fisher factoid of the day. Stick this one in your brain because you're going to need it. You're going to want to use it when this subject comes up. This is from New Zealanders. It was a study of more than 1,000 of them from birth to age 38. Listen to this. They found that persistent cannabis use is associated with neuropsychological decline. Again, that's your brain. Neuro is the brain. Neuropsychological decline broadly across domains of functioning. Your brain doesn't function as it was designed to, even after controlling for years of education. In other words, you don't outgrow this. When the damage is done, it's done. You can't undo it just by education or exercising the little gray cells. Listen to this, and here's the Fisher factoid of the day. Long-term users saw an average decline of 8 IQ points. Pot makes teenagers dumber, and it's permanent. It robs them of 8 IQ points, and that's irreversible. And the tendency, of course, is for teenagers to use it, and to use it perhaps irresponsibly. I mean, not that there's responsible use, but to use it to excess, and it damages the brain. So this is, again, this is established research. The decrease in IQ was linked only to those with adolescent marijuana use, not those who started in adulthood. So it doesn't damage the IQ of adults that use it. It does impair their cognitive performance. It does impair memory. It does have an impact on memory loss later in life. So it does impair neurocognitive functions even in adults. But if teens start using it, it lowers their IQ. It damages the brain. And that's why I think it is a very, very bad idea. And she goes on to say, look, for those who started smoking as teens, stopping didn't fully restore functioning. In other words, the damage that's done to the brain of a teenager is irreversible. You never can undo that. That's permanent loss of intellectual capacity. You know, and one of the things they've seen is when you legalize it for adults, I mean, in Colorado, you got to be 21 to buy it or use it. But some agency in the state of Colorado did a study, and they determined that in the prior month, I think they published this in December, so this is probably in November. But in the prior month, this was after the news had come out, this law had been passed and legalization was on the way, 32% of high schoolers in Colorado had used cannabis, had smoked pot, had used marijuana in the prior month. 32% were out there rotting their brains on marijuana, and part of it is because the signal that was being sent by lawmakers is that, hey, pot use is A-OK. We're going to make it legal for recreational use. If your older brother can use it, these teenagers saying, why can't I? If my parents can use it, why can't I? And, this one study indicated that by the time kids have graduated from high school, nearly half of them have tried smoking pot. So again, I'm suggesting legalizing marijuana is bad public policy if you care about teenagers, and I do. Focal Point, AFR Talk.